My parents let my addict brother destroy my room and life, so I bought their house in auction, doubled the rent, and watched them cry at my door. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and I've always been the responsible one in my family, and somehow that made me invisible. Growing up, I learned early that being dependable didn't earn you praise, it just made you the default problem solver. My parents had 2 sons, me, the steady one, and Kyle, my younger brother, the troubled soul. Kyle's been battling addiction since he was 16. Pills at first, then harder stuff. Every relapse came with excuses. He's stressed. He just needs another chance. You don't understand what he's going through. I wanted to understand. I really did. But it's hard to stay compassionate when your own life keeps getting pushed aside for someone else's chaos. I'd come home from college breaks to find Kyle's things dumped in my old room. My trophies replaced with his rehab pamphlets. Once, I caught him stealing money from my backpack. When I told my parents, my mom's voice shook as she said, "He's sick, honey. Don't make him feel worse." Dad nodded like that was the end of it. No apology. No accountability. Just silence and expectation, be the bigger man. I started to notice how their eyes softened when they looked at him, even when he lied straight to their faces. With me, it was always, "You're strong, you'll figure it out." Love for Kyle was protection. Love for me was delegation. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night in that old house, listening to the faint creak of the hallway floor as Kyle snuck out again, and I'd tell myself I wasn't jealous. But the truth is, I was. Not of his mistakes, but of how much forgiveness he got for making them. I used to think being reliable would make me matter, but all it did was make me their safety net until one day I realized even safety nets get torn. After college, I moved back home to save money and help my parents with bills. It wasn't glamorous, but I figured it was temporary, a stepping stone before I could afford my own place. One converted my old basement room into a small workspace, patched the walls, painted, bought a used desk, even fixed the broken window Kyle had shattered years ago. It felt good to create something mine, even inside their house, but mine was a fragile word in that home. My parents liked to remind me, "It's still our house, sweetheart." Every improvement I made somehow became theirs. When I bought a new washing machine, my dad joked, "Glad you're finally paying rent." When I replaced the living room couch, my mom said, "Kyle will love this when he gets clean." I remember standing there, gripping the receipt in my pocket, wondering if they realized how much that sentence hurt. Kyle drifted in and out like a storm, sometimes sober, sometimes not. He'd sleep for days, borrow my tools, sell my stuff, then vanish again. I once confronted him after finding my Bluetooth speaker missing. He shrugged, eyes glassy. "Relax, man. I'll get it back." He never did. When I told my parents, Mom sighed, "Don't provoke him. You know how sensitive he gets." Insensitive. That was the word they used for everything he destroyed. Meanwhile, I was working long hours, helping with groceries, and quietly covering overdue utility bills they forgot to pay. It didn't matter. Kyle was still the sun they orbited around, and I was the steady moon, useful only when things got dark. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I realized something bitterly simple. I wasn't living with my family anymore. I was living for them. And that realization, it was the beginning of the end. It happened on a Tuesday night. I'd stayed late at work, finishing a report, and when I finally got home, the house was eerily quiet, too quiet. The smell hit me first. Stale smoke, spilled beer, and something burnt. My gut clenched as I walked down the hallway toward my room. The door was wide open. My desk smashed. My monitor cracked. The wall I'd painted myself was stained with some dark, sticky liquid. And my savings jar, the one I'd been filling for a down payment, was gone. On the floor, half buried under torn clothes, was Kyle, passed out, clutching a half-empty bottle like a trophy. For a second, I couldn't even move. My chest burned not with anger, but with that hollow, dizzy feeling you get when your worst fear stops being a theory. I remember whispering, "What did you do?" He didn't stir. I called my parents immediately. They showed up 20 minutes later, Mom crying before she even saw the room. Dad barely looked at me. He went straight to Kyle, shaking him awake. "Son, wake up." "Come on, son." Like there was only one that mattered, I said through my teeth. He destroyed everything. My work laptop. My savings. My room. Mom wiped Kyle's forehead and said softly, "He didn't mean to." "He's sick," is that word again. Sick. As if sickness erased accountability. When I demanded they call the police, my dad's face hardened. "You want to ruin your brother's life over some money? What's wrong with you?" Something in me broke right then, not loudly, not violently, but completely. I realized no amount of logic, effort, or love could balance scales that were never meant to be fair. I packed a bag that night, my hand shaking. As I zipped it closed, I looked around that wrecked room one last time and thought, I can't keep saving people who enjoy watching me drown. The next morning, left before sunrise. No dramatic goodbye, no final confrontation, just me, my duffel bag, and a silence that finally felt like relief. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, peeling paint, creaky floors, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I locked a door that no one else had a key to. My parents called that first week. My mom's voice trembled between guilt and accusation. "You can't just abandon family, sweetheart. Your brother needs you." I remember staring at the phone, wondering if she even realized how backwards that sounded. He destroyed everything I built, and somehow I was the one abandoning them. Kyle showed up a month later. He looked worse than her, pale, jittery. "Mom said you've got your own place," he muttered, eyes scanning the room. "Man, you're doing good. You think you could spot me a couple hundred? I'll pay you back." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I'd heard that same lie since I was 18. I told him no, gently at first, then firmly. He scoffed, called me selfish, and stormed out. Minutes later, Mom texted, "He's your brother. You could have helped instead of judging. That was the last straw." I stopped visiting, stopped answering calls. Every time I tried to rebuild a bridge, they handed Kyle a match. I started therapy, threw myself into work, and kept my circle small. The guilt still crept in. Some nights family loyalty is a hard habit to break, but with every passing week, I felt lighter, and yet deep down, I knew peace never lasts in a family built on chaos. Because no matter how far I moved, I could still feel their gravity pulling me back toward the same old storm. Years passed. At first, I'd flinch whenever my phone buzzed, expecting another crisis call. Another "Kyle overdosed" or "we need rent money." But over time, the calls slowed, then stopped. Silence replaced chaos, and it was strangely peaceful. I built a new life from scratch. Got promoted, bought a reliable car, even made a few friends who didn't know me as the responsible one. I went to the gym, learned to cook, started journaling. For the first time, my life wasn't about fixing anyone. It was about existing without apology. Every now and then, I'd see glimpses of my old world through social media. A photo of Kyle at some recovery group, Mom posting Bible verses about forgiveness, Dad bragging about his boys. I noticed I was never tagged in those posts. It was like I'd been edited out of my own family. I called once, maybe 2 years after I moved out. Dad answered, his tone polite but detached. "Hey, stranger." We talked about the weather, his job, Kyle's latest rehab attempt. Not once did he ask how I was. Before hanging up, he said, "You should visit sometime. Your mother misses you." But when I did, Kyle was sprawled on the couch, eyes glazed, and Mom handed me a grocery list since you're here. I left without saying goodbye after that. I stopped trying. I realized you can't reconnect with people who only remember you when they need something. Still, sometimes late at night, I'd wonder what it would take for them to finally see me not as a resource. Not as the backup plan, but as their son. I didn't know it then, but life was about to hand me that moment. And when it came, it wouldn't be gentle. It was a Thursday night when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let it ring out, but something in me hesitated. When I answered, a familiar voice spoke, hesitant and shaky. "Hey, it's Mark. You know, From the old neighborhood? Thought you should know your parents' place is up for auction next month? For a second, I couldn't process it. Auction? I asked. Yeah, he sighed. Foreclosure notice has been on their door for weeks. I thought you'd already know. My stomach sank. I hung up and sat there, phone heavy in my hand. Part of me wanted to ignore it to tell myself it wasn't my problem, but curiosity won. I drove by their street the next day, parking a few houses down. The lawn was overgrown, paint peeling, curtains drawn. It looked hollow. I knocked anyway. Mom answered, eyes puffy, voice brittle. Oh, you came. Dad appeared behind her, avoiding eye contact. On the couch, Kyle sat with a beer can, smirking. Look who finally remembered he has a family, he said. I ignored him. What's going on? Dad exhaled. We fell behind on payments. The bank's taking the house. We thought maybe you could help. There it was. The old script me, the safety net. I looked at Kyle, then back at my parents. Where's all your money gone? Mom whispered. Your brother's been struggling again. We used most of our savings, helping him get back on his feet. Of course they had. I almost laughed, but it came out like a sigh. I'm sorry, I said, stepping back toward the door. But I can't fix this. As I left, I glanced at the foreclosure sign nailed to the porch post. The same house that had buried me was finally falling apart. And for the first time, I wasn't the one holding it together. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back of the county courthouse wearing a plain hoodie and baseball cap. Rows of people murmured around mean investors, landlords, strangers chasing cheap property. On the screen, property listings flickered one by one. When my parents' address appeared, I felt my pulse skip. That house wasn't just a building. It was years of silence, blame, and bruised pride wrapped in drywall. The auctioneer started fast. Opening bid, $250,000. My fingers tightened around the small paddle I'd been given. A man near the front raised his hand. Then another. I waited. I wasn't there out of malice. I was there for something quieter, closure. When the number hit 300, I raised my paddle. The rhythm of bids quickened. Voices blended. My heartbeat synced with each call. 320. 330. Do I hear 340? 340, I said. Steady. The room hushed as the auctioneer looked around. 340 going once. Twice, sold. The gavel hit. A sound so sharp it felt like it cracked something inside me open and sealed something else shut. When I walked out with the paperwork clutched in my hand, the cool air felt electric. I didn't smile out of spite. I smiled because, for once, I held the power that used to crush me. The house was mine. The same one they'd told me I'd never understand, never control. Now, legally, it belonged to the son they'd overlooked. As I drove away, the streetlights blurred through the windshield. My chest was light, my hands steady. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. But I couldn't ignore the poetic balance of it all. They'd let my brother destroy my world in that house. Now I owned the ruins, and I'd decide what survived. A month later, my parents got the official notice. The property had been sold, and the new owner required new terms. I'd hired a property manager to handle everything: emails, contracts, payments. My name was nowhere on the paperwork. It was safer that way. Cleaner, the rent was adjusted to match current market rates, double what they used to pay. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted them to finally feel what accountability cost. When the notice arrived, my mother called me in tears. The new owner's heartless, she said. Who raises rent on an old couple? I stayed quiet for a long moment before answering. Maybe they're just running a business, Mom, she sniffled. You don't understand. We'll lose everything if we can't pay. That line hit me hard. It was the same thing I'd said years ago when Kyle wrecked my savings. The same thing she ignored. I visited the street a few days later, staying in my car across from the house. The curtains were still drawn. The mailbox overflowed. Kyle's beat-up car sat in the driveway, tires half flat. I watched him stumble out, shouting something at Dad before slamming the door. Some things never changed. The property manager called later that week. Tenants are refusing to sign the new lease. Should we proceed with eviction protocol? For a moment, my throat tightened. I pictured Mom's trembling hands, Dad's tired eyes. But then I remembered my room's shattered glass, broken dreams. My parents comforting Kyle while I stood invisible in the doorway? Yes, I said quietly. Follow procedure. When the call ended, I sat in silence. This wasn't revenge, it was consequence. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up anyone's mess. I was letting the story play out exactly as it was written. By the end of that month, chaos had become their new normal. The property manager forwarded me reports late payments, angry voicemails, even a complaint filed by my father accusing the new owner of harassment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who'd once told me to grow thicker skin was now crying foul because someone finally held him accountable. Kyle, as always, made everything worse. He'd stopped pretending to look for work and started selling whatever he could from the house tools, appliances, even the microwave. The neighbors complained about noise, yelling, and constant traffic at odd hours. The final straw came when police were called one night for a domestic disturbance. My property manager informed me, "Your tenants are officially in breach of contract. You can proceed with eviction." I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt hollow. Still, I signed the order. 2 weeks later, the sheriff delivered the notice. They had 10 days to vacate. Mom called me that night, her voice shaking so hard I almost didn't recognize it. "They're throwing us out, honey. Please, if you know anyone, help us." For a second, I wanted to break. To tell her the truth, to drive over and take it all back, but then I pictured my younger self standing in that same living room, begging for fairness while they defended the person who destroyed me, and I realized this was the full circle they'd chosen. "Mom," said softly, "sometimes you can't fix what you refuse to see." There was silence on the other end. Then a faint, broken whisper, "You sound just like your father." When the line went dead, I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear. The family that once made me feel invisible was finally staring straight into their own collapse. Eviction day came gray and cold, kind of morning where the air itself felt heavy. I parked a few houses down, watching from my car as the sheriff's truck pulled up. My parents stood on the porch, pale and trembling, while Kyle paced near the steps, muttering curses. Boxes and trash bags littered the yard. It looked exactly like my old bedroom after he'd destroyed it tonally this time. The mess was theirs. When the sheriff handed them the final notice, I stepped out. My father's face twisted in disbelief when he saw me walking toward them. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice sharp. I stopped a few feet away, holding the folder I'd brought. "I thought I should introduce you to your new landlord." For a moment they just stared. Then realization hit. My mother's lips parted, trembling. "No, you didn't." I opened the folder and showed them the ownership documents, my name printed clearly at the top. I bought the house. "At auction?" Kyle laughed bitterly. "You're lying." "Check the county records," I said. "It's all public." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom started crying, whispering, "How could you do this to us?" My voice was calm, almost too calm. "You let him destroy my room, my savings, my peace, and told me to forgive him. I'm done forgiving." My father stepped forward, anger flaring in his eyes. "You're punishing your own family." I met his gaze. "No, I'm finally treating you the way you treated me, like a stranger who pays to stay." For once, Kyle said nothing. His bravado cracked, and he looked away. I handed the sheriff a copy of the documents and turned to leave. Behind me, my mother's sobs echoed through the cold air, and my father's voice broke into a whisper I'd waited my whole life to hear. "Please." I didn't stop walking. Word spread fast in our small town. Within days, distant relatives started calling, some furious, others quietly impressed. "You really bought their house?" One aunt whispered over the phone, half in awe, half in judgment. "That's cold, maybe," I said, "but it's honest." The property manager handled the rest. My parents officially moved out a week later. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't even leave a note, just empty cabinets, faded curtains, and the faint smell of cigarettes and dust. Kyle disappeared the same day, vanishing like smoke. I didn't ask where he went. I didn't need to know. For months, the house sat quiet, hollow, and still. Every creak of the floorboards echoed with ghosts of old arguments. I spent weekends renovating it myself, free-painting the walls, fixing the broken doors, replacing shattered glass panes. With every nail and brushstroke, I erased a piece of the past they left behind. When the work was finally done, I didn't sell it. Instead, I rented it to a young couple with 2 kids, a teacher and a mechanic. They reminded me of what I used to wish my family had been: simple, kind, grateful. One afternoon, as I stopped by to check on repairs, their little boy ran past me into the yard laughing. The same yard where Kyle once threw beer bottles at the fence. The sound hit me hard. For the first time in years, that place didn't sound like chaos, it sounded alive. The tenant waved from the porch. "You did good work here, man. It feels like a real home." I nodded, unable to fully explain why that meant so much. Because the truth was, I hadn't just rebuilt a house, I'd reclaimed a part of myself that my family had buried. The piece felt foreign at first, but it was real. And this time, it belonged to me. It's been a year since they moved out. And sometimes I still drive past the old place now, freshly painted. Flowers blooming by the porch, laughter spilling through open windows. It doesn't look like the house I grew up in. Maybe that's why I can finally look at it without feeling the weight of what happened there. My parents now live 2 towns over, renting a small apartment. A mutual friend told me they're quiet these days, humbled, still struggling, but sober from excuses. Kyle resurfaced once, sent me a text that just said, "You win." I didn't reply. Because this was never about winning. It was about finally ending the game. Sometimes, I think about the night I found my room destroyed, the broken desk, the stolen savings, the look in my father's eyes when he defended the man who ruined everything. For years, I thought forgiveness meant pretending it never happened. But peace isn't pretending. It's walking away and not turning back. I know some people will say I was cruel. Maybe I was. But when kindness only enables cruelty, you stop being a victim by refusing to participate. My revenge wasn't the eviction, it was the silence that followed. The quiet where I didn't have to explain myself anymore. Now, when I stand on that front lawn, I don't see a war zone of memories. I see a home that finally found peace because it stopped belonging to the people who poisoned it. Before I leave, I turn the key in the lock one last time. The metal clicks, sharp and final. They taught me that love without respect is just control, I whisper. So I took back the one place they could no longer control me. Then I walk away, not angry, not proud, just free.